Greetings, everyone. This is Jackie Givens here. I am an instructor of many things, but English is one of those. And when I began teaching, one of my goals was to write. And so I've been taking some classes. I know, right? Teachers taking classes. And I've learned quite a bit. And one of the things that I learned that I wanted to share today is about um, I decided to take a screenwriting class. So uh, I was having trouble like going from the beginning of a story to the end of a story in fiction, and I've had that problem. I've written some stuff, but I've struggled through the whole process, right? So if you're one of those that struggle, well, there you go. I'm going to share some stuff that I've learned about screenwriting that can help you through fiction, hopefully. At least that's what I've learned. So my brain functions in this logic, concise way, right? I can be very creative and brainstorm, but then my process needs to be very outlined, so to speak. And I don't mean in the traditional sense of an outline. I just mean like step one is this, step two is this, step three is this, and that helps me. So one of the things that um, I have learned in terms of script writing, and of course in stories you have Act One, Act Two, and Act Three. The thing is that in script writing, it's usually broken down even by pages. Now, as a book length is going to vary, right? Um, some are 10,000 pages. I'm sorry, 10,000 words. 10,000 pages would be a lot to read. So 10,000 words and so on. But uh, one of the things I loved that I learned is that, and if you took your book and you decided, okay, my book is going to be X amount of pages, right? And then you decided this half is going to be Act One, or this third is going to be Act One, this second part is going to be Act Two, and this third part is going to be Act Three. Um, for my brain, that helps me. And let me tell you why. So, one of the things that they talk about in the script writing classes is how many pages should you take to establish things like the protagonist, the introduction of the protagonist, the introduction of the antagonist, the introduction of the setting, the scenery, the world in that story. Um, a major incident that might happen, sometimes called the inciting incident, that sends this protagonist on his or her journey or their journey, um, and they feel the need to move forward, right, in the story. And then, of course, you in script writing, and it should be in fiction too. There's a flaw that the main character generally has. So, and some sort of need as well. So the thing that I love about that is if you're establishing, if you have this little circle, this little bubble that you're sticking everything in, you know that that first third of your story is going to be that, whether it's script writing or fiction or whatever. And for a script, it's usually about the first 20 pages or so. And in a book, of course, like I said, you'd have to decide, okay, what's the approximate length of this book? Where should I start? Where should the middle be and where should the end be? So then the second part of this that I love as I started writing on my personal story, which I'll talk briefly about, but I'm not ready to fully share that, um, is my character. Well, first of all, as I sat down to use this Act One information, my character, she has a nickname, but her full name is Margaret. I decided to do some research on her. She is a scientist, and to establish really a great protagonist, I believe that you have to do extensive research, and so do most people. Even though most of that won't show up in your story, that's an important piece that you have to know as you're going through and go, well, would a person that owns a dog do this? Or would a person that had an extensive background in abuse do this? So you have to constantly ask yourself, is that within the realm of this person's life, right? Does it matter? Um, and then the second part of that, as I was going through, so that protagonist, The antagonist is the person who people generally think as the enemy, the person against them. It's actually the person who places those obstacles in front of the person who's trying to achieve this overall goal, right? So then in Act Two, um, the world changes, right, for the protagonist. Like the world shifts because of that incident that happened. So if somebody's murdered, and this starts this person on a journey, because in my story, my main character's mentor, and not the mentor of the entire story, but the one that you see as the mentor, is the scientist over her, is murdered. And it starts her on this journey. So she's exposed to a whole new world during this journey, where she experiences all types of things that she just didn't know existed. And some of those have to do with what she's studying. Like she's doing some studying on some animals, and they have these special abilities that she learns about. So it's this whole new world. And this whole second part of a film, um, of the film information, this act two, of course, is the longest part. And if you think about story structures, if you're in a classroom learning about that, and they say act two, act one starts down here, and then you have your climax, right? And then you have your resolution, that is consistent. This whole middle section of act two in any story is the largest, right? So this new world comes out, your character's exposed to all um, this new way of things. The mentor of the story is introduced. Now, I found that very interesting because a mentor, it can manifest in very many different ways. Um, for my character, a police officer is her mentor, and sort of works through some of this stuff with her. That's where the friends, enemies, the people involved in the story are introduced, obviously, because you have this whole journey going on. Um, there are all the obstacles that happen. And I mean, if there is a goal in a story to solve a mystery or find the cure to a disease or whatever it is, obviously there's obstacles to that, or nobody would watch it, right? It would just be boring. You'd go from here, here's this police officer that's helping you, and then suddenly we've solved the world's problems. So that would be very boring. Um, and so in a story that you read, you want that excitement of the obstacles, where you're questioning constantly, is this person going to be able to achieve this goal? Are they going to make it? Who are all these people we're introducing? Sometimes a minor, which isn't very minor, but an important character who's maybe a side character, is introduced in a story to make a point, to illustrate part of a personality, to help get over an obstacle. They have an important role, but they might not be in it, through the whole thing. So this is where that midpoint is, what they generally call it, when you're talking about scripts, and that climax that happens in any fiction story, right? So it transports this protagonist into this really new place in the person's life. Um, the obstacles increase during this time, obviously, and get more and more difficult. There becomes this point where you're asking, where maybe even the protagonist is saying, "Am I going to be able to do this? Maybe I should just quit. Let's just throw in the towel." Right. And the mentor hopefully is there to help with that journey and getting over the obstacle, which in my story, he is. There's a male police officer in there. And the climax is where she's almost murdered by the antagonist, who is sort of a religious zealot type person. Don't get too upset about that. It's a very extreme form of religion, um, and that he's following. So I think that is a cool way to look at every story. I think that a lot of people who try to write, including myself on occasion, leave out those huge obstacles that happen, and that end point where there's this huge, overwhelming obstacle to get through, that really is just, the audience or whoever's reading, the reader is just like, you know, this is it. It's over. So uh, that I find that part very interesting and very applicable. So all of the screenwriting techniques and in the fiction techniques, and probably even as my husband and I were talking about doing documentaries, uh, those it's very relevant too. People don't think of documentaries having a protagonist and an antagonist, but in reality, they do. That's a conversation for another time. So if we were going to break this down, and we had like the first 20 pages is introducing that new stuff, and then suddenly there's this place where the protagonist, something happens, like at the murder, right? And my character is placed in the hospital for a period of time where she meets her mentor. Um, and that's sort of her signal to move forward. And so if that were the first 1 to 20 pages, or the first third or so of a book or a film, then the second part is about up to close to around 90, 100 pages for the second part if you're looking at scripts. And it's also, the book shouldn't, even though there's three parts, the middle part obviously is going to be the longest. So you're introducing all this stuff, right? And then you have all these obstacles here. In this second part, you have the huge, um, whatever happens where she's almost killed, that really sets off, am I really going to continue on this path to achieve my goal of finding a cure to a disease, or finding a savior for mankind, whatever this thing is. Do I really want to do that? And just when everything seems like that's the end, you have act three, right? And so it's sort of I'm going all in, or I'm not going at all, right? And most of the time, you're going to see them go all in, hopefully, so that the story can continue. And then there'll be that final uh, part where there's a fight. Maybe your main character has learned taekwondo or some sort of, or preps for the attack or whatever it is, and ends up fighting back. And there's this fight that's like the end all be all of the fight in the story. And it doesn't have to be physical, right? This can be a different type of fight. Um, and then, of course, hopefully there's some resolution at the end if you're writing a good story. And one of the things that I really loved about learning more is that you don't really, happy endings are wonderful and awesome, but uh, in the resolution part of your story, whether you're writing fiction or a screenplay, the protagonist doesn't always get there to that goal. They might not, and that does happen. uh, I love it when it's a sequel. There's a sequel to it, and they haven't achieved the goal, but there's a hint that they might, and then they get to move on to the next film, the next book. So I love that, and of course, there's this. One of the things in one of my characters is that she has the power to communicate with animals. And so at the end of her story, and she denies it. She doesn't like it. She doesn't believe it's true. But toward the end of the story in Act Three, she realizes that it served her well. That it is part of her. Uh, that she discovers that her power is actually right on, right on. It's true, and that everything her parents told her was true. And so a lot more to that coming. But as I develop mine, I hope to be able to share some of that. And then, of course, if you're doing a script, it's very short, which I'm doing a side by side. And so I'm using the story structure to construct both stories. I'm doing a fiction book and the script writing. One of the classes that I hope to do, since we're in Writing Made Easy, and I want that to apply to script writing too, is that I'll go over how to format the scripts properly. There's actually a specific format that people have in the industry, and how that's done is very organized and strategic. So I will do my best to do a good job of that one. And just remember that the the protagonist of any story drives that story. They are in charge of that story. They are the ones that we're watching to see what's going to happen with them, and they always have the inner need to be to something. Right? For mine, it's to be accepted, to be normal. That's the biggest one. To be normal, and she's not normal. Um, and she wants to be normal so that she can be accepted. So anyway, so I hope that that was helpful a little bit. I'm going to, because I do these for classes and stuff, it's very informal. Sometimes I put big graphics up on the screen, and sometimes I just talk. So we'll see how that goes. But my next little thing is I'll focus on creating a story structure, and we'll actually hopefully get together and write a story together and learn about, hey, what's this look like? There's a specific way to do that, and I prefer using something that film people use to create the structure, the beginning structure of the story, which is a beat sheet. Some people use outlines. I like the narrative part of that, so part of me wants to be extremely organized and part of me wants to narrate, right? Which they can both be combined, but that's my favorite way to do it. So we'll be working on that. And then I guess I'll leave you with the thought that if you're watching this and you're one of my students or not, um, never write a story without knowing your characters. Something that's really helped me get on the ball with my storylines and really getting out there and doing some good strong story structures that people will hopefully be very interested in has to do with my background research. So let me give you an example. I have one who comes from a long line of scientists, and so um, she has literally a lineage that comes from female scientists, and I did that on purpose. First of all, because I think that having a strong woman in one of those areas of your story is very important to me as a woman, and showing the intelligence and strength and stuff like that. Um, but she comes from a long line of scientists, and the male who is actually the mentor of that story comes from a long, very dating way back lineage of people who were protectors. So whether they were protectors in, um, way back and before police officers, or if, and currently he's a police officer. So I like that. And they even have parents. I know who their parents are. I know what they like to wear, what they like to watch, um, what kind of personality quirks they have. Uh, do they like coffee? What do they eat? And of course, much of that stuff won't get into. Well, some of it will. It already is, but much of that won't get into my story. But I'll always have that lens of who is this person as I'm developing it. So anyway, thanks for listening, and feel free to ask questions. I do things on academic writing and creative writing, and I'm kind of just getting started with some of the creative stuff. I do have a couple books. One is a children's book. I have one under a maiden name under Jones, and then I have two books under my last name, Gibbons. But I'm not trying to sell those, so I'm not gonna even share them until later on. And I will actually share live writing streams as soon as I can. So thank you, and have an excellent, wonderful, incredible day.